folks, welcome to TalkAboutTopeka.com. I'm Chris Schultz, and today we are at the Combat Air Museum out here at Forbes Field. Let's go check it out. This place is awesome. Can't wait to show you.
Chris, good afternoon. Welcome to the Combat Air Museum.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. We're so glad to be able to show this off on Talk About Topeka.
Well, we're very happy to have the program here. Would you mind signing in, please?
Of course, of course. So everybody signs in when they come in, right?
We do. We like to keep track of where all our visitors come from. This is our gift shop, as you can see, and you'll be channeled through here on your way out, so that you spend a little bit of money.
You always have to drop the money, folks. So.
I'd like to introduce you to Chris.
Hi, Chris.
This is
Nice
Gene,
to meet
our
you, Gene.
chairman. Gene
Welcome to the
Holliker.
Combat Air Museum.
Glad to be here. Can't wait to show this place off.
Well, let me tell you, Chris, you're in a very historical hangar here right now.
Yeah, the history starts with a hangar, right?
It sure does. In fact, this is the last hangar built at the south end of the flight line in World War II. And it was probably completed, started in about 1942 and completed and opened by 43. And it is a Butler building, built by Butler Building in Kansas City, and there's still a name tag or a plaque way up on them rafters up top there that spells out the date and Butler Building and all of that. And as you can see, the heater systems, it's going to be a little chilly in here today. I have to warn you before we get started. When the government was using these heaters that you see around the hangar, you have to remember that fuel oil was 10 cents a gallon. So, and we run one heater right up above us here, doing a restoration in the winter for 1 month, and got a bill for $3,000, and we said, shut it off.
Yeah. We'll wear an extra coat.
So, but I would say that if people come to the Combat Air Museum, typically it's nice in the hangars. If it's January and it's cold, it's going to be cold, but we have heated galleries and display rooms and our gift shops, and so there's plenty of places they can get warm. And the one thing that we pride ourselves on is we have free coffee year-round here.
All right.
So a person can get a free cup of coffee.
The only people who don't complain coming into this museum in January and February, people from Minnesota or Canada or Alaska.
They say we can take it. And so we've been here now for 35 years. And it's amazing the people that live in the area that will say they've never been out here.
Yeah, yes, I
So,
definitely have said, you know, have you been to the Combat Air Museum? A lot of people say, what?
Right.
And
Where's
that's,
that?
yeah. Hopefully we can change that. Hopefully folks
we appreciate that.
will get out and come and see this thing, because it's amazing.
By the way, the Jenny is another one of our flyable airplanes here. This is a replica Jenny, and it's going to really fit into our World War I exhibits for this year. The really neat thing about this aircraft is the fact that it was designed and built by one of Boeing's 3 top flight engineers. You always hear the 2 guys in Seattle, but you never hear about the guy who was in Wichita by the name of Elton Riley. And his office was right next door to Mr. Schaefer's, or as the people in Wichita would say, Old Man Schaefer's office. He was Mr. Boeing. And Elton was the guy who was the test pilot from the B-47 bomber. He was the guy that perfected air-to-air refueling, and he called one day, and we talked to him on the phone, and he said that he would like to donate his airplane to the museum. And we just couldn't believe that he wanted to give this aircraft to us, and so he actually flew it up here very shortly afterwards and donated the aircraft to the museum. This Taub here was built by a gentleman and his wife, for his wife to fly, and it's a 50% replica of a German Taub bomber, and it has a tremendous history. That aircraft does. The original ones in World War I, and we have that here. And when people come, we can tell them about it. It's too long of a story to tell now. Let's
Blue Angel.
Yeah, let's.
Right
The Blue Angel was actually one of the first aircraft that we put in the museum. Our original.
When was that?
This aircraft came here in 1977.
Okay.
And I remember that very distinctly because actually I was the one that helped restore it. And we took one of the sky cranes, helicopters, which you'll see in the other hangar, and took it to Lawrence and hooked up to it, and we actually flew it in. Now we took the back off, took the engine out, and we made 2 loads with the Sky Crane. We brought the aircraft, and then we brought the engine secondly. The paint had literally, setting in the sun the way it had just been wore off. So we repainted it from top to bottom in Imron and refinished the cockpit, and it's in pristine condition. So
I remember when I was a kid, you know, they used to have the air shows out here.
right.
And didn't we have the Blue Angels here once
We
or twice?
several times, yes. We had the Thunderbirds, the Blue Angels, the Canadian Snowbirds.
It was quite amazing.
It was called the Superbatics Air Show that the Combat Air Museum put on. And people, once they ask why we aren't still having those air shows, and it's simple as this, that probably the first air show that we put on cost us about $25,000. The next thing that air shows were $50,000, and when the air shows got to be over a 2-day event, $500,000, that's a lot of risk to take. If it rains on one of those days, you're going to have a lot of debt.
And we've got that, you know, last year we had the Gathering of Warbirds and Legends, and we
They
got to
did.
go up on one of the planes, and I believe they're going to do it again this year. So another event that's coming back out here in this area. So
And we had our
pulled this plane down as part of the exhibit. 3 Grummins we pulled down.
And we had the F-14 Tomcat that's in the other hangar down there, and then the Panther, which is back behind here. So, yep, we made up 3 of the Grummins on the Grumman row there, and boy, that was a beautiful exhibit.
It sure was.
Yeah,
we want to put in a plug for folks to come out and check that out. And come by the Combat Air Museum at the same time.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
I might say that we've got 3 MiGs in our museum we're proud of. We have the MiG-21, and this particular aircraft is on loan from the Seattle Museum of Flight. They called us and said they'd like to put it in our museum if we'd like to have it. And so it's on loan. It's kind of a permanent loan from the Seattle Museum of Flight. Outside and not in the museum, there's a MiG-17, and it hasn't been restored yet, but we're hoping to do that sometime.
And if I may, Chris, I want to talk a little bit about the sophistication and technology the Russians used when they built this originally. You see this little stick hanging up here, and there's one on each wing. And that was how the pilot told whether the undercarriage was down or not. If the stick was up or was
lowers
down. And that was the extent of the technology, but it worked.
Now we have iPhones that tell them, right?
Simple.
It's better than calling your buddy and say, fly underneath me and tell me if my gears are up.
Okay, so we've got not only one hangar of fun over here, we're headed off to the other hangar as well. Tell us about hangar number 2 over here.
Well, Chris, this is our second hangar. It's this hangar was built after World War II, and as we said in the other hangar, there was a World War II hangar, and we talked about that. So this hangar was built later on in the mid-1950s. This isn't the Smithsonian, and it certainly isn't the most beautiful hangar in the world, but the bottom line is, it's the real Air Force hangar that's been here since the mid-1950s. We just have to do the best with what we've got. There's some things you can change and some things you can't. Obviously, it's not possible to heat and air condition these hangars, so if we can just keep the birds out of them, then we're happy. So let's take a look at some of the airplanes and things we have here. By the way, this is the console for the radar unit that we saw outside.
Yeah.
That was the one that was the original radar unit that was at Forbes Field that went to Billard Airport to the United States Weather Bureau that saw the Topeka tornado.
In the 66.
That's the screen right there that originally saw the Topeka tornado.
Wow.
Our friend Phil Scheidler, who's just passed away recently, watched that tornado come in, and of course WIBW newsman Bill Curtis says,
Absolutely.
"Take cover quick." There it is, right there.
This is what told him to say it, right there.
And we've got plans to fix this up and try to make it look a lot more attractive and do things with it. But you know, the wheels of progress turn a little slow sometimes when you're volunteers. So
and there's the typical cell phone of yesterday.
Yes. What we carry around in our pockets with our phones can probably do the same thing now.
yeah,
And rotary dial.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, let's see some of these other planes around here.
By the way, when we're passing right here, this is a World War II trainer, the BT-13, and we got this aircraft came from a. You always hear about the airplane that's behind the farmer's house or in the farmer's barn.
Yeah.
And you go chasing after those, and believe me, you very seldom ever find one. And a gentleman told me that there was BT-13 in the farmer's behind the farmer's house or in his barn at Colby, Kansas. And on my way to Denver, I went to looking for it, and I want to tell you, so far out in the country that you get lost finding it. I pulled up, and I couldn't see this aircraft, and I knocked on his door, and he finally took me down to see it, and this was sitting behind the big shed where he was storing corn, the big round silo thing. We purchased the aircraft, and he had 2 more in the barn. And so we bought all 3 airplanes and brought them to Topeka, and this is our display model. We have the wings for it. The wings just aren't on it right now. But we decided to take the panels on the side and cover those with plexiglass so that people could actually see the inside of the airplane, how the pilots, where their feet would be working and so on. And in fact, this is a wet wing. The fuel tanks are in the middle of the wing. And when the pilot looks down between his feet, that's where the fuel gauge is. It's between his feet. Vultee BT-13. They used to call him the vibrator, I think was its nickname.
So the moral of the story with this plane is if you put the wings back on it and take it back up there, make sure you wear pants when you're flying. Right?
There you go.
And it certainly didn't look like this when it was at the back of the hangar.
So it's a restoration project still going on, but it's pretty well getting finished. So.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a lot of displays around. This here is the tail gunner's position in a Navy airplane with the turret and the 30 caliber machine gun that we've set up. And I've never seen one of those in a museum, to be honest about it. I don't think any museum has more engines than we do. We have one of the best engine displays of any museum that you'll find, certainly in the Midwest. And in fact, when the racers come to Heartland Park, you don't see them very often looking at the airplanes. They come over here because the word's out we got engines, and they're over here wanting to look at our engines. So we have quite a lot of engines. In fact, we found out, I'll just tell you, this is a very rare engine right here was on a tire for a long time. We knew it was a very historical engine, but this hub here would tell you that this is the same engine that would have gone on Howard Hughes' racing airplane. And there were very few of these made.
Wow.
And when people come through and they get to asking you about them, they think we don't know what it is. And if they can possibly get their hands on it, that they'll have the crown jewels here. Well, we know what it is. Mm-hmm. And we love it, and so do the people who come that know what it is. So,
wow.
So you either like engines or you don't, and those that like them love them as much as people who like airplanes.
Have a look at this huge helicopter.
Wow.
It's called a sky crane, or it's known as a sky crane, and it literally does pick up planes and boxes and intermodal sort of idea, but this ferried in one of our planes in the other hangar.
That's quite a span there.
Yeah.
It is huge.
They decided that we could have one for the Combat Air Museum. They flew it in, and they flew it right to the front door and shut it off, and we backed it in. It was flying when it got here. Wow. The thing that's unique about it is that this plane, or one like it, still holds the altitude climbing record. I am told that it's been put up against an F-15 numerous times, and this helicopter will be at 10,000 feet before an F-15 can get to 10,000 feet. Actually, besides the pilot who's flying up front, they can actually turn around backwards. The guy who sits back here can turn around backwards, and the pilot can turn this over to him, where he can watch it going on, and he can actually fly the helicopter from the back here.
Wow.
And if you look over here, this is a movie replica of a Messerschmitt, a German fighter, which the very famous and numerous, but this was in a movie, Battle of Britain.
Oh,
movie.
wow.
So it's just a replica, but it certainly gives you an idea of the scope of the German
and even
most popular fighter.
We actually had a real ME-109 here at one time, and it went back to California to the owner. And these movie models were made from molds that were made off of a real ME-109. And let me show you something over here. If you look at it very closely in the light, you see the rivet patterns. You can see the rivet patterns. So I mean, you see where all the doors go. So they actually built this off of a real fiberglass molds that were made off of a real airplane, so they could make them. Of course, they had to make a mass of them, set them on the runway, and what they actually did was they put explosives in them to blow them up. And as I was told by the person that donated this to us from California, that this one the explosives didn't go off, and that's how he got it. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed.
Blown up.
But this is our restoration project here right now. This F-86 Sabre came to us from the Hawkeye Institution of Aviation in Waterloo, Iowa. And they were actually running it up, and it caught on fire. And rather than do any more to it, we acquired this F-86. And in fact, we transported this thing from Waterloo, Iowa to Topeka on a Sky Crane helicopter, just like that one. I might also mention while we're going by here, the F-3D Sky Knight there is a very rare and historical aircraft. And I'll pretty much leave it at that, but I'll tell you, if anybody wants to come out to the Combat Air Museum for a visit, we have tour guides here, and if they will ask for Ralph, he'll tell them more about that airplane than they ever wanted to know. This is a very rare airplane, the O-47B North American. This is one of the planes that's in the hangar, in the museum, that actually does not belong to us. It belongs to Mr. Billy Dempsey from Rantoul, Kansas, who has had a lot of airplanes in his lifetime and restored and flew and had a fire bombing service and one thing another. Quite often the tire brakes would leak hydraulic fluid or brake fluid, and when you put them on, typically sometimes the brakes catch on fire. And that wasn't an unusual thing, as they tell me. I've never seen it happen. I don't want to be on one when it does happen.
Certainly wouldn't.
So his 500-pound armor-piercing bombs over there were under a tree at Fort Riley. Those are real World War II bomb carts that they're on, and so we have a lot of historical stuff stored up around here that it is history. So
I'll tell you, the funnest part of this is that this isn't your typical museum, because you go to a museum, everything's locked behind glass, and
that's right, you can't touch.
I'm touching. You can get right up there and
well, I think we mentioned
it.
before, this is supposedly our most family-friendly organization in Topeka, because you can do exactly what you said, touch and feel, and we don't bar anyone from really touching any of our aircraft.
We don't tell them not to take pictures. We don't tell them not to touch. Now, obviously, we don't want people just
damaging anything.
But it isn't going to hurt someone to touch an airplane or feel it. And young kids and people want to feel the metal or feel the fabric or something. So it is a very, as Dave said, we're a family-friendly organization.
Chris, who hasn't seen Top Gun? Tom Cruise flying this plane. Beautiful F-14 Tomcat.
Yeah, it really is beautiful.
We're very fortunate, one of the few museums who have these, because the Iranians had a lot of these, and the government decided to break them up after they were taken out of service, so that the Iranians couldn't get a hold of spare parts and so on. So if an Iranian comes in the front door, we have to tell them, sorry, you can't come to the other hangar. That's a joke.
Yeah, I hope so.
The thing that makes it unique is that the Navy asked us if we would like to leave the 20-millimeter cannon in it.
Of course.
And we said yes, because actually there's nothing missing. The engines have been taken out and some sophisticated boxes, but all the radios and everything basically in this one. And the reason that's important is because the planes that were given to museums very shortly after we got this one were gutted. But so what we did, the Wings Over the Rockies Museum in Colorado in Denver, they had their gun taken out and put on a base down below so people could see it. And I've been out there and looked at it several times. They asked us if we wanted them to take this one out. We said, no, we want it left in the aircraft. And we made the plexiglass panel so that the people, that's where it ought to be. You can see it, and it's not getting dirty. It's just like new. Look at the condition of it.
It looks, it does look brand new.
Yeah. You'll never know how big this aircraft is until you go to clean it. When you see Top Gun and you see what this plane is capable of doing, it's unbelievable. You don't imagine it being as big as it is.
Yeah.
I used to have, when I was a kid, I had a G.I. Joe model of this. I think it's still at my mom's basement or something somewhere. It's probably worth some money right now. Remind me to get that on eBay.
One of the things that we've always wanted at the museum was a flight simulator. People can actually, we start them out on a Cub. You can fly an F-14 Tomcat, a big commercial airliner, 747, helicopter. About anything you want, you can fly, and you can land at fields all over the world. And we got Santa Catalina Island set up for the guys that want to land a C-47 with a little tricky landing, short runway, high up. Try to put an A4 on an aircraft carrier, which isn't very easy to do.
I wouldn't imagine.
So on. It's just a wonderful way to experience flying, and without spending a lot of money or crashing and killing yourself.
Yeah, but that's always a good thing. Really got a great place out here, and I can't get to you guys quick enough to tell you need to be out here to the Combat Air Museum, because they've got some great exhibits as we've seen here today. And folks, really just get out here and see this stuff, because well, why wouldn't you?
Please come on by. We're only too welcoming. We want to see as many as we can get.
And these guys really know their stuff, and you could spend all day out here if you want to. They're going to have all kinds of answers for you. I mean, we're not even going to be able to show you a smidgen of the things we were able to pick up here on this tour, because these guys are a wealth of information, and you've got so much wonderful stuff to look at. So from what you saw, multiply that by 100,000 and get out here to the Combat Air Museum. Folks, we're coming to get you. If you're not going to come out here, we're coming to get you, to bring you to the Combat Air Museum. So get out. Here we go.